Hello there. Hello to Mary and Evelyn and Kelly and Sharon. Those are the names that came up before I sat down, and all the others. Thank you so much for joining me. Whether you join me here on Instagram Live or on the YouTube channel Fireside Reading, I very much welcome your company, and I'm so grateful that you've found this and that it's filling your day a little bit. It's giving you a little something that you enjoy. So my name is Gildart, and I'm Fireside Reading. I sit in front of the fire every day, and I read a chapter or two of a wonderful old book. And I've been wondering whether it would be better to read 5 days a week or continue with 7 days a week. I was thinking I might experiment with 5 days a week just to see what that's like. But if anybody has any opinions, please pop them in the comments and I'll look at them afterwards. Just in general, really, any thoughts that you have, I welcome. And you can always get in touch with me to the email address firesidereadingwithgildart@gmail.com too. Today, we're going to continue with David Copperfield, Chapter 16, the final part of Chapter 16, and we will find out what happens when David has a very strange evening with Dr. Strong and all of his family. Welcome to a Fireside Reading of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Chapter 16, Part 3. Mrs. Strong's mamma was a lady I took great delight in. Her name was Mrs. Markleham, but our boys used to call her the old soldier on account of her generalship and the skill with which she marshalled great forces of relations against the doctor. She was a little sharp-eyed woman who used to wear, when she was dressed, one unchangeable cap ornamented with some artificial flowers and two artificial butterflies supposed to be hovering above the flowers. There was superstition among us that this cap had come from France and could only originate in the workmanship of that ingenious nation. But all I certainly know about it is that it always made its appearance of an evening, wheresoever Mrs. Markleham made her appearance, that it was carried about to friendly meetings in a Hindu basket, that the butterflies had the gift of trembling constantly, and that they improved the shining hours at Dr. Strong's expense like busy bees. I observed the old soldier not to adopt the name disrespectfully to pretty good advantage on a night which is made memorable to me by something else I shall relate. It was the night of a little party at the doctor's, which was given on the occasion of Mr. Jack Maldon's departure for India, whither he was going as a cadet or something of that kind, Mr. Wickfield having at length arranged the business. It happened to be the doctor's birthday, too. We had had a holiday, had made presents to him in the morning, had made a speech to him through the head boy, and had cheered him until we were hoarse, until he had shed tears. And now in the evening, Mr. Wickfield, Agnes, and I went to have tea with him in his private capacity. Mr. Jack Maldon was there before us. Mrs. Strong, dressed in white with cherry-coloured ribbons, was playing the piano when we went in, and he was leaning over her to turn the leaves. The clear red and white of her complexion was not so blooming and flower-like as usual, I thought, when she turned round. But she looked very pretty, wonderfully pretty. "I have forgotten, Doctor," said Mrs. Strong's mamma when we were seated, to pay you the compliments of the day, though they are, as you may suppose, very far from being mere compliments in my case. Allow me to wish you many happy returns."
"I thank you, ma'am," replied the doctor.
"Many, many, many happy returns," said the old soldier. "Not only for your own sake, but for Annie's and John Maldon's and many other people's. It seems but yesterday to me, John, when you were a little creature, a head shorter than Master Copperfield here, making baby love to Annie behind the gooseberry bushes in the back garden."
"My dear mamma," said Mrs. Strong, "never mind that now."
"Annie, don't be absurd," returned her mother. "If you are to blush to hear of such things now, you are an old married woman. When are you not to blush to hear of them?"
"Old?" exclaimed Mr. Jack Maldon. "Annie? Come."
"Yes, John," returned the soldier, "virtually an old married woman, although not old by years. But when did you ever hear me say, or who has ever heard me say, that a girl of 20 was old by years? Your cousin is the wife of the doctor, and as such what I have described her. It is well for you, John, that your cousin is the wife of the doctor. You have found in him an influential and a kind friend, who will be kinder yet, I venture to predict, if you deserve it. I have no false pride. I never hesitate to admit frankly that there are some members of our family who want a friend. You were one yourself before your cousin's influence raised up one for you."
The doctor, in the goodness of his heart, waved his hand as if to make light of it and save Mr. Jack Maldon from any further reminder, but Mrs. Markleham changed her chair for one next the doctor's, and putting her fan on his coat sleeve, said, "No, really, my dear doctor, you must excuse me if I appear to dwell on this rather, because I feel so very strongly. I call it quite my monomania. It is much a subject of mine. You are a blessing to us. You really are a boon, you know." Nonsense, nonsense," said the doctor.
No, I beg your pardon," retorted the old soldier. "With nobody present but our dear and confidential friend, Mr. Wickfield, I cannot consent to be put down. I shall begin to assert the privileges of a mother-in-law, if you go on like that, and scold you. I am perfectly honest and outspoken. What I am saying is what I said when you first overpowered me with surprise. You remember how surprised I was? By proposing for Annie. Not that there was anything so very much out of the way in the mere fact of the proposal, it would be ridiculous to say that, but because you, having known her poor father, and having known her from a baby 6 months old, I hadn't thought of you in such a light at all, or indeed as a marrying man in any way. Simply that, you know."
Aye, returned the doctor good-humouredly. "Never mind."
"But I do mind," said the old soldier, laying her fan upon her lips. "I mind very much. I recall these things that I may be contradicted if I am wrong. Well, then I spoke to Annie, and I told her what had happened. I said, 'My dear, here's Dr. Strong has positively been made you the subject of a handsome declaration and an offer.' Did I press it in the least? No, I said. 'Now, Annie, tell me the truth this moment. Is your heart free?' 'Mamma,' she said, crying, 'I am extremely young,' which was perfectly true, 'and I hardly know if I have a heart at all.' 'Then, my dear,' I said, 'you may rely upon it, it's free. At all events, my love,' said I, 'Dr. Strong is in an agitated state of mind and must be answered. He cannot be kept in his present state of suspense.' 'Mamma,' said Annie, still crying, Would he be unhappy without me? If he would, I honour and respect him so much that I think I will have him. So it was settled. And then, and not until then, I said to Annie, Annie, Dr. Strong will not only be your husband, but he will represent your late father. He will represent the head of our family. He will represent the wisdom and station, and I may say the means of our family, and will be, in short, a boon to it. I used the word at the time, and I have used it again today. If I have any merit, it is consistency. The daughter had sat quite silent and still during this speech, with her eyes fixed on the ground, her cousin standing near her and looking on the ground too. She now said, very softly, in a trembling voice, Mamma, I hope you have finished. No, my dear Annie, returned the old soldier, I have not quite finished. Since you ask me, my love, I reply that I have not. I complain that you really are a little unnatural towards your own family, and as it is of no use complaining to you, I mean to complain to your husband. Now, my dear doctor, do look at that silly wife of yours. As the doctor turned his kind face with its smile of simplicity and gentleness towards her, she drooped her head more. I noticed that Mr. Wickfield looked at her steadily. When I happened to say to that naughty thing the other day, pursued the mother, shaking her head and her fan at her playfully, that there was a family circumstance she might mention to you, indeed, I think I was bound to mention, she said that to mention it was to ask a favour, and that, as you were too generous, and as for her to ask was always to have, she wouldn't.
Annie, my dear, said the doctor, that was wrong. It robbed me of a pleasure.
Almost the very words I said to her, exclaimed her mother. Now, really, another time, when I know what she would tell you, but for this reason and won't, I have a great mind, my dear doctor, to tell you myself.
I shall be glad if you will, returned the doctor.
Shall I?
Certainly.
Well, then, I will, said the old soldier. That's a bargain. And having, I suppose, carried her point, she tapped the doctor's hand several times with her fan, which she kissed first, and returned triumphantly to her former station. Some more company coming in, among whom were the two masters and Adams, the talk became general, and it naturally turned on Mr. Jack Maldon and his voyage, and the country he was going to, and his various plans and prospects. He was to leave that night after supper in a post-chaise for Gravesend, where the ship in which he was to make the voyage lay, and was to be gone, unless he came home on leave or for his health, I don't know how many years. I recollect it was settled by general consent that India was quite a misrepresented country, and had nothing objectionable in it but a tiger or two, and a little heat in the warm part of the day. For my own part, I looked on Mr. Jack Maldon as a modern Sinbad, and pictured him the bosom friend of all the Rajas in the East, sitting under canopies, smoking curly golden pipes, a mile long if they could be straightened out. Mrs. Strong was a very pretty singer, as I knew, who often heard her singing by herself. But whether she was afraid of singing before people or was out of voice that evening, it was certain that she couldn't sing at all. She tried a duet once with her cousin Maldon, but could not so much as begin. And afterwards, when she tried to sing by herself, although she began sweetly, her voice died away on a sudden, and left her quite distressed, with her head hanging down over the keys. The good doctor said she was nervous, and to relieve her proposed a round game of cards, of which he knew as much as the art of playing the trombone. But I remarked that the old soldier took him into custody directly for her partner, and instructed him, as the first preliminary of initiation, to give her all the silver he had in his pocket. We had a merry game, not made the less merry by the doctor's mistakes, of which he committed an innumerable quantity, in spite of the watchfulness of the butterflies, and to their great aggravation. Mrs. Strong had declined to play on the ground of not feeling very well, and her cousin Maldon had excused himself because he had some packing to do. When he had done it, however, he returned, and they sat together, talking on the sofa. From time to time she came and looked over the doctor's hand and told him what to play. She was very pale, and she bent over him, and I thought her finger trembled as she pointed out the cards, but the doctor was quite happy in her attention, and took no notice of this, if it were so. At supper we were hardly so gay. Everyone appeared to feel that a parting of that sort was an awkward thing, and that the nearer it approached, the more awkward it was. Mr. Jack Maldon tried to be very talkative, but was not at his ease, and made matters worse. And they were not improved, as it appeared to me, by the old soldier, who continually recalled passages of Mr. Jack Maldon's youth. The doctor, however, who felt, I'm sure, that he was making everybody happy, was well pleased, and had no suspicion but that we were all at the utmost height of enjoyment.
"Annie, my dear,"
he said, looking at his watch and filling his glass,
"it is past your cousin Jack's time, and we must not detain him, since time and tide, both concerned in this case, wait for no man. Mr. Jack Maldon, you have a long voyage and a strange country before you, but many men have had both, and many men will have both to the end of time. The winds you are going to tempt have wafted thousands upon thousands to fortune, and brought thousands upon thousands happily back."
"It's an affecting thing," said Mrs. Markleham. "However it's viewed, it's affecting to see a fine young man who one has known from an infant going away to the other end of the world, leaving all he knows behind and not knowing what's before him. A young man really well deserves constant support and patronage." Looking at the doctor, "Who makes such sacrifices?"
"Time will go fast with you, Mr. Jack Maldon," pursued the doctor, "and fast with all of us. Some of us can hardly expect, perhaps, in the natural course of things, to greet you on your return. The next best thing is to hope to do it, and that's my case. I shall not weary you with good advice. You have long had a good model before you in your cousin Annie. Imitate her virtues as nearly as you can."
Mrs. Markleham fanned herself and shook her head.
"Farewell, Mr. Jack," said the doctor, standing up, on which we all stood up. "A prosperous voyage out, a thriving career abroad, and a happy return home."
We all drank the toast, and all shook hands with Mr. Jack Maldon, after which he hastily took leave of the ladies who were there and hurried to the door, where he was received, as he got into the chaise, with a tremendous broadside of cheers discharged by our boys who had assembled on the lawn for the purpose. Running in among them to swell their ranks, I was very near the chaise when it rolled away, and I had a lively impression made upon me, in the midst of the noise and dust, of having seen Mr. Jack Maldon rattled past with an agitated face and something cherry-coloured in his hand. After another broadside for the doctor and another for the doctor's wife, the boys dispersed, and I went back into the house, where I found the guests all standing in a group about the doctor, discussing how Mr. Jack Maldon had gone away, and how he had borne it, and how he had felt it, and all the rest of it. In the midst of these remarks, Mrs. Markleham cried, "Where's Annie?" No Annie was there, and when they called to her, no Annie replied. But all pressing out of the room in a crowd to see what was the matter, we found her lying on the hall floor. There was great alarm at first, until it was found that she was in a swoon, and that the swoon was yielding to the usual means of recovery. When the doctor, who had lifted her head upon his knee, put her curls aside with his hand, and said, looking around,
"Poor Annie, she's so faithful and tender-hearted. It's the parting from her old playfellow and friend, her favourite cousin. This has done it. Oh, it's a pity. I am very sorry."
When she opened her eyes and saw where she was, and that we were all standing about her, she rose with assistance, turning her head as she did so to lay it on the doctor's shoulder, or to hide it, I don't know which. We went into the drawing-room to leave her with the doctor and her mother, but she said it seemed that she was better than she had been since morning, and that she would rather be brought among us. So they brought her in, looking very white and weak, I thought, and sat her on a sofa. "Annie, my dear," said her mother, doing something to her dress, "see here. You have lost a bow. Will anybody be so good as to find a ribbon, a cherry-coloured ribbon?" It was the one she had worn at her bosom. We all looked for it. I myself looked everywhere, I'm certain, but nobody could find it. "Do you recollect where you had it last, Annie?" said her mother. I wondered how I could have thought she looked white or anything but burning red when she answered that she had had it safe a little while ago, she thought, but it was not worth looking for. Nevertheless, it was looked for again, and still not found. She entreated that there might be no more searching, but it was still searched for in a desultory way, until she was quite well, and the company took their departure. We walked very slowly home, Mr. Wickfield, Agnes and I, admiring the moonlight, and Mr. Wickfield scarcely raising his eyes from the ground. When we at last reached our own door, Agnes discovered that she had left her little reticule behind. Delighted to be of any service to her, I ran back to fetch it. I went into the supper-room where it had been left, which was deserted and dark. But a door of communication between that and the doctor's study, where there was a light, being open, I passed on there to say what I wanted and to get a candle. The doctor was sitting in his easy-chair by the fireside, and his young wife was on a stool at his feet. The doctor, with a complacent smile, was reading aloud some manuscript explanation of statement of a theory out of that interminable dictionary, and she was looking up at him, but with such a face as I never saw. It was so beautiful in its form, it was so ashy pale, it was so fixed in its abstraction, it was so full of a wild, sleepwalking, dreamy horror of I don't know what. The eyes were wide open, and her brown hair fell in two rich clusters on her shoulders and on her white dress, disordered by the want of the lost ribbon. Distinctly, as I recollect her look, I cannot say of what it was expressive. I cannot even say of what it is expressive to me now, rising again before my older judgment. Penitence? Humiliation? Shame? Pride? Love and trustfulness? I see them all, and in them all I see that horror of I don't know what. My entrance and my saying what I wanted roused her. It disturbed the doctor too, for when I went back to replace the candle I had taken from the table, he was patting her head in his fatherly way and saying he was a merciless drone to let her tempt him into reading on, and he would have her go to bed. But she asked him in a rapid, urgent manner to let her stay, to let her feel assured, I heard her murmur some broken words to this effect, that she was in his confidence that night. And as she turned again towards him, after glancing at me as I left the room and went out at the door, I saw her cross her hands upon his knee and look up at him with the same face. Something quieted as he resumed his reading. It made a great impression on me, and I remembered it a long time afterwards, as I shall have occasion to narrate when the time comes. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you're enjoying this book as much as I am. Chapter 17 begins tomorrow, same time, 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading on Instagram. All the chapters uploaded to the YouTube channel Fireside Reading if you prefer to watch and listen that way. And until I see you again, please stay very well. Good night.